Terry Griffin stood on the porch of his ranch, coffee mug in hand, watching the golden morning sun rise over the sprawling fields. The air was crisp, the scent of dew and hay mixing in the stillness that only rural life could provide. For Terry, a retired military veteran, this land was more than just property. It was his sanctuary, a retreat from the chaos he had left behind in his years of service. Here he could enjoy a life of self-reliance and peace, tending to his horses and working the land. That peace was about to be shattered. The low rumble of an engine broke through the quiet, drawing Terry's attention to the long dirt road leading up to his property. He squinted, spotting an unfamiliar truck kicking up dust as it made its way toward his gate. His brow furrowed. He wasn't expecting anyone. Most of his neighbors respected his space and gave him a heads-up if they were dropping by. Visitors who didn't know the way to town would occasionally get lost. But something about this truck seemed different. The vehicle came into focus. A shiny white pickup truck with bold blue letters across the side reading Homeowner Association Patrol. Terry's confusion turned to irritation. He'd heard of homeowner associations, usually associated with suburban developments full of tightly packed houses and manicured lawns. But his ranch was far removed from any of that. His property was outside city limits, nestled among acres of privately owned land. He had never joined any homeowner association, nor had any intention of doing so. The truck rolled to a stop at his gate. Two men climbed out, both wearing matching navy polo shirts embroidered with the same Homeowner Association Patrol logo. They looked more like salesmen than any kind of official authority. One was tall and lanky, carrying a clipboard, while the other was shorter, stockier, and held what looked like a digital tablet. Terry set his coffee down on the porch railing and crossed his arms, waiting to see what these strangers wanted. "Morning," the tall one called out cheerfully as he approached the gate. He seemed oblivious to Terry's unwelcoming stance. "We're here on behalf of the Green Meadows Homeowners Association. We'd like to have a quick word about your property." Terry raised an eyebrow. "Green Meadows?" he asked, his voice gruff. "I'm not part of any Green Meadows anything. You must have the wrong address." The shorter man, who had been fidgeting with his tablet, stepped forward. "Actually, sir, according to our records, your property falls under the expanded jurisdiction of Green Meadows Homeowner Association as of this year. We're conducting routine inspections to ensure compliance with community standards." Terry stared at them, dumbfounded. "Expanded jurisdiction? What the hell are you talking about? This is private property, not some suburban cul-de-sac, and I sure as hell didn't agree to be part of any homeowner association." The taller man smiled thinly, clearly used to resistance. "I understand this may come as a surprise, sir, but the association recently updated its boundaries to include properties within a certain radius of the development. It's all in the paperwork filed with the county. Now, if you don't mind, we'd like to take a look around to ensure everything is in order." Terry's jaw tightened. The audacity of these people was staggering. They were speaking as if they had any authority over him or his land. "You're not setting foot on my property," he said firmly. "Whatever so-called paperwork you've got doesn't mean a damn thing to me. This land has been in my name for over a decade, and I'm not under anyone's jurisdiction. Now turn that truck around and get off my road." The stocky man glanced at his colleague, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face, but the taller one remained undeterred. "Sir, I must insist, non-compliance with homeowner association guidelines can result in fines and other penalties. We strongly recommend cooperating to avoid any complications." Terry took a step closer to the gate, his eyes narrowing. "Let me make something clear. You're trespassing. If you don't leave right now, I'll call the sheriff and let him sort this out." The shorter man seemed to falter, muttering something under his breath, but the tall one held his ground. "We're just doing our job, sir," he said, his tone growing sharper. "You might want to consider that ignoring homeowner association regulations could negatively impact the value of your property. We're here to help, not cause trouble." Terry couldn't help but laugh, a dry, humorless chuckle that only seemed to rattle the pair further. "Value? I didn't buy this ranch to impress anyone or worry about community standards. I'm not interested in your help, and I sure as hell don't need it. Now, for the last time, get off my land." The men hesitated, clearly weighing their options. Finally, the shorter one muttered, "Let's go," and the two of them retreated to their truck. But before climbing in, the taller man turned back and called out, "You'll be hearing from us, Mr. Griffin. This isn't over." Terry stood at the gate, watching as the truck disappeared down the dirt road. His initial anger gave way to a nagging unease. Who were these people to show up uninvited and make demands? And what did they mean by expanded jurisdiction? He knew he needed answers, and fast. He felt Terry stare at him. For now, though, he would make sure they didn't come back uninvited. Terry headed to his workshop and retrieved a fresh can of paint. That afternoon, he repainted the faded letters on his private property "No Trespassing" sign, making them bold and unmistakable. If Green Meadows thought they could strong-arm him, they were in for a rude awakening. The morning after the Homeowner Association patrol's unwelcome visit, Terry Griffin sat at his kitchen table with a steaming mug of black coffee and his laptop open in front of him. The peaceful morning light streaming through the windows did little to calm his growing irritation. He was determined to understand what had just happened and why a homeowners association, an entity he had no authority over his property, believed it had any authority over his property. Terry started his investigation the way any modern man would, by searching online. He typed Green Meadows Homeowner Association into the search bar, and dozens of results popped up, most of them local articles or posts on community forums. It didn't take long for him to realize that this homeowner association was infamous in the area. Complaints ranged from petty fines for minor infractions, like leaving a trash can out an hour too long, to more serious accusations of overreach and mismanagement. Several threads mentioned a boundary expansion initiative the homeowner association had undertaken earlier in the year. Terry leaned back in his chair, brows furrowed. Boundary expansion. That explained the patrol's mention of his property supposedly being included in their jurisdiction, but could an homeowner association really expand its reach to include private properties that were never part of its original plan? That seemed absurd, even illegal. He opened a few of the articles and read more. Apparently, the Green Meadows Homeowner Association had been trying to grow its influence, claiming that incorporating nearby properties would enhance community cohesion and improve property values for everyone. But the process seemed murky at best. Many residents who were swept up in the expansion claimed they hadn't been notified, while others said they had received letters that were vague and full of legal jargon. One particularly scathing editorial referred to the homeowner association as a land grab disguised as community improvement. Terry's blood boiled as he read on. These people thought they could bully him into compliance for the sake of their property values? Not a chance. He needed to see exactly what they had filed with the county, so he decided to take the fight to the source. An hour later, Terry was driving his dusty old truck into the small nearby town where the county clerk's office was located. It was a humble building, unassuming with its beige bricks and modest sign, but it housed the records that could make or break his case. Terry stepped inside, his boots echoing on the linoleum floor, and approached the receptionist's desk. "Morning," he greeted, tipping his hat slightly. "I need to look up some property records, specifically anything involving Green Meadows Homeowner Association and my land." The receptionist, a middle-aged woman with glasses perched on her nose, gave him a polite smile. "Of course. What's your address?" Terry provided the details, and she began typing away on her computer. After a few moments, she frowned and adjusted her glasses. "It looks like there's been an update to the records on your property. Green Meadows Homeowner Association submitted a boundary amendment earlier this year that includes your land. They've classified it as part of their extended jurisdiction." "Extended jurisdiction?" Terry echoed, his voice laced with disbelief. "And no one thought to tell me?" The woman's expression softened. "I understand your frustration, sir. This has been a common complaint." The county approves these amendments if the homeowner association provides documentation showing it will benefit the community. But let's just say it's not a perfect system. If you'd like, I can print out the filing for you. Please do, Terry said, crossing his arms as he waited. A minute later, she handed him a stack of papers stapled together. Terry quickly scanned the document, his eyes narrowing at the language. It was filled with legalese, phrases like jurisdictional inclusion, community benefit provisions, and assessment compliance. He didn't need a law degree to know this was a mess. Thanks, he said, tucking the papers under his arm. One more question. Is there a way to dispute this? The receptionist hesitated. You'd need to consult a property attorney. But if the homeowner association didn't follow the proper procedures, or if they violated your rights as a property owner, you might have a case. Terry nodded grimly. Appreciate your help. Back at the ranch, Terry spread the documents out on his kitchen table, determined to make sense of them. He read through the filing, line by line, jotting down notes and questions in a spiral notebook. It was clear the homeowner association had been strategic in how they worded the amendment. They claimed the expansion was necessary to protect the aesthetic and economic integrity of the area, but there was no concrete evidence to back that up. They also listed a handful of supposed benefits for the newly included properties: improved road maintenance, access to shared facilities, and neighborhood security patrols. Terry scoffed. He didn't need any of that, especially when it came with the price tag of fines and invasive oversight. One line, however, stood out. It stated that property owners included in the expansion had been notified via certified mail. Terry's jaw clenched. He had never received any such notice. Either they were lying or something had gone seriously wrong in their process. He decided to add it to the growing list of inconsistencies he planned to challenge. Terry knew he couldn't fight this alone. The homeowner association had lawyers on their side, and he'd need professional help to take them on. Reluctantly, he picked up his phone and dialed the number of a local property attorney he'd found online. The phone rang a few times before a cheerful voice answered. Law Office of Thomas Hansen, how can I help you? Hi, Terry said. My name's Terry Griffin, and I've got a problem with an homeowner association trying to claim my property. I need to know if I've got a case to fight this. Homeowner association disputes? The receptionist replied knowingly. You've come to the right place. Let me set you up with a consultation. Are you available tomorrow morning? Yeah, Terry said. The sooner the better. After hanging up, Terry leaned back in his chair, staring at the stack of papers on the table. He had a long fight ahead of him, but he wasn't the type to back down from a challenge. If Green Meadows thought they could strong-arm him into submission, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. Terry Griffin pulled his truck into the gravel lot of the law office of Thomas Hansen the next morning. The modest building, a converted home, had an unassuming charm. White siding, a small porch, and a weathered wooden sign advertising the firm's expertise in property disputes. Terry wasn't one to place his faith in lawyers, but he knew he needed someone well-versed in legal battles against the homeowner association machine. As he stepped inside, a receptionist greeted him warmly. Good morning, Mr. Griffin. Mr. Hansen will see you shortly. Please have a seat. Terry nodded and took a seat in a leather chair by the window, glancing around the room. The walls were lined with framed certificates and awards, but what caught his eye were the photographs of previous clients holding small signs that read, "Case closed." It gave him a glimmer of hope that his situation might end similarly. Mr. Griffin? A voice called his name, and Terry turned to see a middle-aged man in a crisp suit extending his hand. I'm Thomas Hansen. Let's talk about your case. Terry followed him into a small but tidy office. Hansen gestured to a chair opposite his desk, where Terry placed the stack of homeowner association documents he had brought along. So, Hansen began, leaning forward with a pen poised over a legal pad. Tell me what's going on. Terry explained everything. The unexpected visit from the homeowner association patrol, the claim that his property was part of their expanded jurisdiction, and the documents he'd retrieved from the county clerk's office. Hansen listened intently, occasionally jotting down notes. but his expression remained neutral, giving little away. When Terry finished, Hansen picked up the stack of papers and flipped through them. "First off," he began, "you did the right thing by not letting them onto your property. They have no right to enter without your permission unless they have a court order, which they clearly don't. As for this expanded jurisdiction, it's not uncommon for homeowner associations to attempt these maneuvers, but whether it holds up legally is another matter." "Can they even do this?" Terry asked, his frustration evident. Hansen sighed. "Technically, yes, but it depends on the process they followed. They need to notify affected property owners, certified mail is the standard, and provide an opportunity to contest the amendment. Based on what you've told me, it sounds like they skipped a few steps." "More like all the steps," Terry muttered. "I never got anything from them, and I sure didn't agree to any of this." "Good," Hansen said, his tone firm. "That's a key point we can use to challenge them. If they failed to notify you properly, their claim over your property is invalid, but we'll need to gather more evidence to strengthen your case." Hansen outlined a plan of action. First, he would file a formal request with the county clerk's office to obtain all records related to the homeowner association's boundary expansion, including proof of notification. He would also send a cease and desist letter to the homeowner association demanding they remove Terry's property from their jurisdiction and refrain from further contact. Lastly, he advised Terry to keep documenting every interaction with the homeowner association, no matter how minor. "Homeowner associations rely on intimidation," Hansen said, his voice steady but resolute. "They assume most people will comply because fighting back seems too costly or complicated. But you have a solid case, Terry, and I'm confident we can put an end to this." Terry felt a weight lift off his shoulders. "Thanks, Thomas, I appreciate it." As he drove back to his ranch, Terry replayed the conversation in his mind. Hansen's confidence was reassuring, but Terry knew this wouldn't be a quick or easy battle. The homeowner association wasn't likely to back down without a fight. The following week, Terry received a certified letter from Green Meadows Homeowner Association. It was a formal notice accusing him of non-compliance with community guidelines for failing to remove his barn, which they claimed violated their aesthetic standards. The letter also included a warning: failure to comply would result in fines and possible legal action. Terry couldn't believe the audacity. He scanned the letter, noting the veiled threats and bureaucratic language designed to intimidate. But instead of feeling fear, he felt a surge of determination. They had just handed him more evidence of their overreach. He immediately called Hansen to update him. "They're doubling down," Terry said, his voice steady despite his anger. "I just got a letter threatening fines and legal action over my barn." "Perfect," Hansen replied, his tone calm. "Keep that letter. It shows they're trying to enforce rules on a property they don't legally control. It'll strengthen our argument." Encouraged by Hansen's confidence, Terry took matters into his own hands to further protect his property. He installed a second no trespassing sign at the end of his driveway and added security cameras to monitor the entrance. If the homeowner association patrol tried to come back, they wouldn't be able to deny their actions. Sure enough, a few days later, the patrol truck reappeared. This time, Terry was ready. He watched from his porch as the same two men from before got out and approached the gate. Terry didn't give them the chance to speak. He grabbed his phone and started recording. "You two again?" he called out, his tone sharp. "I told you before. You're trespassing. Leave now or I'm calling the sheriff." The taller man, clearly frustrated, held up his clipboard. "Mr. Griffin, we're here to issue a compliance notice." "I don't care what you're here for," Terry interrupted. "You have no authority on my property. Get off my land before I press charges." The shorter man glanced nervously at the security cameras Terry had installed. "Let's go," he muttered, tugging on his colleague's sleeve. Reluctantly, they returned to their truck and drove away. Terry sent the video to Hansen that afternoon. "This is gold," Hansen replied. "It proves they're continuing to harass you, despite having no legal right to do so. It's exactly the kind of evidence we need." As the days turned into weeks, Terry found himself embroiled in a battle of wills with the homeowner association. They sent more letters, each more aggressive than the last, but Terry refused to budge. With Hansen's guidance, he filed a formal complaint with the county, challenging the validity of the boundary amendment and requesting an investigation into the homeowner association's practices. At the same time, Hansen's legal team began building their case, uncovering evidence that the homeowner association had failed to properly notify property owners and had misrepresented their authority in official filings. It was clear the homeowner association had overstepped its bounds, and Terry was determined to make them pay for it. Despite the stress and frustration, Terry felt a growing sense of pride. He wasn't just fighting for himself. He was standing up for everyone who had ever been bullied by an homeowner association. And he wasn't about to back down. The air felt heavy as Terry Griffin walked into the county courthouse for the first time in years. He wasn't here for jury duty or a civic ceremony. He was here to defend his land, his freedom, and his rights. With every step echoing off the marble floors, his resolve hardened. This was not a fight he had chosen, but it was one he intended to win. Thomas Hansen met him in the lobby, a confident smile on his face. "Ready for this?" the attorney asked, extending his hand. Terry shook it firmly. "Damn right I am. Let's show them they picked the wrong guy to mess with." Hansen led him into a small conference room where the initial hearing was set to take place. The opposing party, represented by a sharp-looking homeowner association attorney and the smug Green Meadows Homeowner Association president, Carla Vincent, was already seated. Terry noted how Carla's polished appearance seemed to scream self-importance. Every detail, from her expensive blazer to her meticulously styled hair, radiated an air of superiority. The judge, a seasoned woman with a no-nonsense demeanor, entered the room. Everyone rose as she took her seat at the head of the table. She wasted no time. "We're here to address the complaint filed by Terry Griffin against the Green Meadows Homeowner Association concerning jurisdictional overreach and harassment. Let's begin." Hansen opened the proceedings with a clear and powerful argument. "Your Honor, the Green Meadows Homeowner Association has unlawfully attempted to claim jurisdiction over my client's private property. They have not only failed to provide proper notification of their so-called boundary expansion, but have also engaged in repeated acts of harassment. We intend to prove that their actions are not only illegal, but also a blatant abuse of power." The Homeowner Association's attorney, a slick man named Derek Wilkes, smirked as he replied, "Your Honor, Green Meadows Homeowner Association has acted in full compliance with county regulations. The expansion of our boundaries was legally approved, and all affected property owners were notified via certified mail. Mr. Griffin simply chose to ignore these communications." Terry felt his blood boil, but Hansen placed a calming hand on his arm. "Don't worry," he whispered. "We've got them." Over the next 2 hours, Hansen meticulously dismantled the homeowner association's claims. He began by presenting evidence that no certified mail had ever been sent to Terry's address. The county clerk's records, which Hansen had obtained through a formal request, revealed a glaring omission. Terry's name and address were nowhere on the list of recipients for the boundary amendment notice. "This is a critical failure on the part of the homeowner association," Hansen argued. "Without proper notification, my client had no opportunity to contest the amendment. Their entire claim to his property is invalid." Wilkes tried to counter by arguing that notification was implied through public postings in community newsletters and online forums. Hansen was ready. He held up a copy of the so-called newsletter, a cheaply printed flyer distributed only within the Green Meadows development, and pointed out that it made no mention of Terry's property specifically. "Implied notification is not sufficient, Your Honor," Hansen said firmly. "The law requires direct notification for a reason, to ensure property owners are fully aware of changes that affect their rights." The judge nodded, her expression stern. "Mr. Wilkes, your defense of implied notification is weak at best. The evidence presented so far does not support your client's claim of due process. Next, Hansen introduced video evidence of the homeowner association patrol trespassing on Terry's property, as well as the aggressive letters demanding compliance with homeowner association regulations. Each piece of evidence painted a picture of an organization willing to bully and intimidate an innocent property owner. Terry watched Carla Vincent squirm in her seat as Hansen read aloud one particularly absurd letter accusing him of lowering community standards by failing to repaint his barn. This letter, Hansen emphasized, is not just baseless, it's laughable. Mr. Griffin's barn has stood on his property for over a decade, well before Green Meadows Homeowner Association existed. They have no authority here. When it was Wilkes' turn to respond, he tried to pivot. Your Honor, Green Meadows Homeowner Association's actions were driven by a desire to protect property values and maintain community harmony. Mr. Griffin's refusal to cooperate has forced us to escalate matters. The judge's eyes narrowed. Protecting property values does not grant your organization the right to harass or trespass on private land. I strongly suggest you choose your words carefully, Mr. Wilkes. As the hearing progressed, it became clear that the homeowner association's case was unraveling. Hansen delivered the final blow when he presented inconsistencies in the homeowner association's filings with the county. Dates didn't match up, signatures were missing, and key approvals appeared to have been rushed through without proper oversight. This is not just a case of overreach, Hansen concluded. It's a case of negligence and outright disregard for the law. My client deserves not only the removal of his property from their jurisdiction, but also compensation for the undue stress and harassment he has endured. The judge called for a recess to review the evidence. Terry stepped outside with Hansen, his nerves still on edge. "How do you think it's going?" he asked. Hansen grinned. "Better than I expected. They've got nothing solid to stand on. Just keep your cool. We're almost there." When the judge returned, her verdict was decisive. After reviewing the evidence, it is clear that Green Meadows Homeowner Association has acted improperly in their attempt to claim jurisdiction over Mr. Griffin's property. The lack of proper notification and the questionable integrity of their filings render their boundary amendment invalid. Furthermore, their repeated harassment of Mr. Griffin is She turned to Carla Vincent and Wilkes. "The Homeowner Association is hereby ordered to remove Mr. Griffin's property from their jurisdiction immediately. Additionally, Mr. Griffin is awarded damages for legal fees and emotional distress. Let this serve as a reminder that organizations like yours must operate within the bounds of the law." Terry felt a wave of relief wash over him as the gavel struck. He shook Hansen's hand firmly. "You did it, Thomas. Thank you." Hansen smiled. "You stood your ground, Terry. That made all the difference." As Terry walked out of the courthouse, he felt a renewed sense of pride, not just in his land, but in his ability to fight for what was right. The battle had been tough, but he had shown Green Meadows Homeowner Association that some lines couldn't be crossed. The ranch was his sanctuary once again, and no one would take that from him. The dusty Texas wind carried a sense of finality as Terry Griffin parked his truck back at his ranch. The drive home from the courthouse had been quiet, but his mind was far from still. Though the judge had ruled in his favor, the battle with the Green Meadows Homeowner Association had taken a toll. Terry felt both a deep sense of relief and a lingering frustration over how close he had come to losing his sanctuary to an organization he'd never agreed to join. Stepping out of his truck, Terry paused to take in the familiar sights of his land. The sprawling fields dotted with wildflowers stretched to the horizon. His barn, weathered but sturdy, stood as a testament to years of hard work and dedication. This land wasn't just property, it was a piece of his soul, and now it was safe. Inside his home, a small pile of mail waited for him on the kitchen table. Among the usual bills and flyers was an envelope bearing the Homeowner Association's logo. Terry grimaced but opened it anyway, curious about their final move. The letter was a formal acknowledgement of the court's decision, stating that his property had been removed from their jurisdiction. It was signed by Carla Vincent, whose name now felt like a bad memory. Terry placed the letter in a folder with all the other documents from the case and shoved it into a drawer. He hoped it was the last time he'd have to think about the homeowner association. The following weeks brought a strange sense of normalcy. Without the looming threat of the homeowner association, Terry returned to his usual routines, repairing fences, tending to his horses, and enjoying the quiet evenings on his porch with a cold beer in hand. But he couldn't shake the nagging thought that others might not have been as fortunate in their battles with overreaching homeowner associations. One afternoon, while refueling his tractor, Terry's phone buzzed. It was Thomas Hansen. "Terry," the lawyer said, his voice upbeat, "you might want to check out the local paper. They're running a story on your case." Terry chuckled. "Didn't think my little feud would make headlines." "Oh, it's more than a headline," Hansen replied. "Your case has stirred up a hornet's nest. Turns out you're not the only one they've been harassing." Curiosity piqued, Terry stopped by the nearest store on his way to town and grabbed a copy of the paper. The front page featured a bold headline: "Homeowner Association Overreach Exposed. Local Rancher Wins Legal Battle Against Green Meadows." Below it was a photo of Terry standing in front of his barn, arms crossed, with a determined expression. The article detailed not only Terry's case, but also stories from other property owners who had faced similar issues. One woman, whose home was near the edge of the homeowner association's boundary, claimed she had been fined thousands of dollars for violations she didn't commit. Another man had been forced to sell his property after being inundated with frivolous legal threats. Terry's victory was being hailed as a turning point, inspiring others to push back against the homeowner association's tactics. As Terry read the article, a thought began to take shape. He had won his fight, but many others were still struggling. Maybe it was time to do something about that. The next week, Terry organized a community meeting at the town hall. Word spread quickly, and on the day of the meeting, the room was packed with property owners, many of whom Terry had never met. Some were there to share their own horror stories about the homeowner association, while others came simply to listen and learn. Thomas Hansen joined as a guest speaker, offering legal advice and answering questions. Terry stood at the front of the room, feeling a mix of nerves and determination. "I didn't plan to end up in a fight with the Green Meadows Homeowner Association," he began, "but when they came after my land, I knew I couldn't let them win. And now, seeing all of you here, I realize this isn't just about me. It's about standing up for what's right, for all of us." The room erupted into applause. Over the next 2 hours, residents shared their experiences, discussed potential strategies, and brainstormed ways to hold the homeowner association accountable. By the end of the meeting, the group had formed a coalition to advocate for fair treatment of property owners. They called it the Independent Landowners Alliance, and Terry was unanimously voted its leader. As the weeks turned into months, the alliance gained momentum. They lobbied local officials to tighten regulations on homeowner associations, ensuring greater transparency and accountability. They held workshops to educate property owners about their rights and even helped several residents successfully challenge unfair fines and policies. Terry's ranch became the unofficial headquarters for the movement, a place where people gathered to strategize and share updates. Meanwhile, the Green Meadows Homeowner Association faced increasing scrutiny. Carla Vincent resigned as president amid mounting pressure, and several board members followed suit. The organization's aggressive tactics became a cautionary tale, and local media continued to cover the fallout. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Terry sat on his porch, watching the sky turn shades of orange and pink. He sipped his beer, feeling a rare sense of peace. The fight with the homeowner association had been exhausting, but it had also given him a new purpose. He had gone from a quiet rancher to a community leader, and while he hadn't sought that role, he was proud of the difference he had made. The sound of gravel crunching pulled Terry from his thoughts. A truck was coming up the driveway, but this time it wasn't an unwelcome visitor. It was Thomas Hansen, who stepped out of the vehicle with a grin. "Thought I'd drop by," Hanson said, holding up a bottle of whiskey. "Figured we could toast to your hard-earned victory." Terry chuckled. "You're just trying to get me drunk so I'll hire you again." "Guilty as charged," Hanson replied with a laugh. He poured them both a glass, and the two men raised a toast under the fading light of the Texas sky. "To standing your ground," Hanson said. "To never backing down," Terry replied. As they clinked glasses, Terry felt a sense of closure. The battle with the Green Meadows Homeowner Association was over, but its lessons would stay with him forever. He had learned the value of resilience, the importance of community, and the power of standing up for what's right, even when the odds seemed stacked against you. And as long as he had his land, his freedom, and his principles, Terry knew he could face whatever challenges came his way.